This woman demanded I give up my baby Bassinet on a flight. But the moment the flight attendant checked my status, her face went completely blank. By the time I reached the airport gate, my body felt like it had already run a marathon. Traveling with a baby is exhausting on a good day. And this was not a good day. We'd been awake since before sunrise, juggling feedings, diaper changes, security checks, and the kind of stares only tired parents recognize. My baby had been unusually restless, crying in short bursts that made my chest tighten every time someone glanced our way. I could feel the familiar anxiety creeping in, the fear that other passengers would already be annoyed before we even boarded. This flight wasn't something I booked last minute. I had planned it carefully, down to every detail, because I knew how important comfort would be for my baby and for me. When I chose the seat with a bassinet, it felt like a small blessing in an otherwise stressful journey. I checked and rechecked the reservation, called the airline in advance, and even arrived early just to make sure nothing went wrong. That bassinet wasn't a luxury to me. It was a necessity. It meant my baby could sleep safely, and I could rest my arms and maybe close my eyes for a few minutes without fear. As boarding time approached, the gate area was chaotic in the way only airports can be. Rolling suitcases clattered across the floor, announcements echoed over the speakers, and families clustered around outlets charging their last few percentages of battery life. I gently rocked my baby, whispering soothing words, hoping to keep the crying to a minimum. Every small whimper felt amplified, as if the entire terminal could hear it. I kept reminding myself to stay calm. Babies cry. That's normal. Still, the pressure to be the polite parent weighed heavily on me. When we finally boarded, the flight attendant greeted us with a warm smile and confirmed our seat. She pointed out the bassinet location and reassured me that everything was already set up. That simple moment, just a few words, felt like a release. For the first time all day, I exhaled. I carefully settled into my seat, arranged my carry-on with diapers and bottles within reach, and gently placed my baby into the bassinet. Almost instantly, the crying softened into quiet sniffles. I looked around the cabin and felt a sense of cautious relief. This was going to be okay. We were finally settled. Other passengers were busy stowing luggage or scrolling through their phones, and no one seemed bothered by us. I even allowed myself to imagine a peaceful flight. Maybe my baby would sleep. Maybe I'd get through a movie. Maybe this journey wouldn't be as hard as I feared. What I didn't know then was that this calm was temporary. While I was focused on my baby and trying to keep everything together, someone nearby was already watching us with growing irritation. At that moment, though, I was unaware. I was just a tired parent clinging to one small comfort, believing that the hardest part of the day was finally behind me. I had barely settled into that fragile sense of calm when I felt that uncomfortable awareness that someone was watching me. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was just another curious glance from a fellow passenger. People always look when they see a baby on a plane. But then the staring didn't stop. I glanced up and noticed a woman seated a few rows away, leaning into the aisle, her eyes fixed directly on the bassinet. Her expression wasn't neutral or curious. It was sharp, annoyed, and calculating, like she'd already decided something wasn't fair. Before I could even process what was happening, she stood up and waved her hand sharply to get the flight attendant's attention. Her voice carried across the cabin in a way that made several people look up. She pointed straight at the bassinet and said she needed that seat. Not asked, demanded. She complained that she had a long flight ahead, that her back hurt, and that it was ridiculous. A baby got extra space while she didn't. The entitlement in her tone was so sudden and so aggressive that I sat there stunned, my hands frozen mid-motion. The flight attendant remained calm and professional, explaining that the bassinet seat had already been assigned and couldn't be moved. That should have been the end of it. Any reasonable person would have sighed, accepted the explanation, and sat back down. But this woman wasn't interested in reasonable. Her face tightened, and she let out an exaggerated laugh, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. She said it wasn't fair and that she paid just as much as anyone else, as if that somehow entitled her to take something meant for a baby. Then she turned her attention directly to me. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering in a way that felt judgmental and invasive. She asked again, loudly, if I could just hold the baby, so she could have the bassinet instead. My heart started pounding. I couldn't believe someone would say that out loud, let alone on a packed flight. The suggestion felt absurd and insulting, as if my baby's needs were optional, something I should sacrifice for her comfort. Around us, the atmosphere shifted. People stopped what they were doing. Conversations paused. I could feel the cabin's attention slowly centering on me, and that familiar wave of parent guilt washed over me. I hated being the center of attention. I hated that my baby was being treated like an inconvenience. I stayed quiet, partly out of shock and partly because I didn't want to escalate the situation. My baby stirred slightly, sensing the tension, and I instinctively reached into the bassinet to soothe them. The woman mistook my silence for weakness. She scoffed and muttered comments under her breath about special treatment and people bringing babies on planes. Each word felt like a small jab, sharp and unnecessary. I could feel my face growing warm, a mix of embarrassment and anger building in my chest. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about respect and the disturbing belief that she had the right to take something that was never hers to begin with. What bothered me most wasn't just what she said, it was how comfortable she seemed saying it. Her voice grew louder, sharper, as if the cabin were her personal stage. She started explaining her situation to anyone who would listen, complaining about legroom, comfort, and how unfair it was that some people got special privileges. Every sentence was delivered with exaggerated sighs and eye rolls, making sure the attention stayed firmly on me and my baby. I could feel the heat of dozens of eyes turning in our direction, and my stomach twisted with discomfort. Then she crossed a line that still makes my jaw clench when I think about it. She glanced at the bassinet again and said, loudly, that babies don't even remember flights, and that my child's comfort shouldn't outweigh hers. That comment landed like a slap. I felt my chest tighten, not just with anger but with hurt. My baby wasn't an object. My baby was a human being, small and vulnerable, and completely dependent on me to protect them. The fact that she could dismiss that so casually was shocking. The flight attendant tried once more to de-escalate. Speaking in a calm, measured tone, she explained airline policy, safety guidelines, and why bassinets were reserved specifically for infants. Instead of calming down, the woman scoffed again and accused the crew of favoritism. She demanded to know why someone like her had to follow rules while others didn't. Her words dripped with implication, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to shame me into giving in. I stayed quiet, gripping the edge of my seat, reminding myself that responding emotionally would only make things worse. My baby began to fuss again. Small sounds at first, then louder cries as the tension grew. The woman seized on that instantly. She gestured toward us and said, see, that's exactly why I shouldn't have to sit near this. The cruelty of it left me momentarily speechless. I felt my eyes sting. Not quite tears, but that burning pressure that comes right before them. Around us, the cabin atmosphere had fully shifted. Some passengers looked uncomfortable, clearly disapproving of her behavior. Others avoided eye contact altogether, pretending to be deeply interested in their phones or the seatback screens. A man across the aisle shook his head slightly, and a woman nearby offered me a sympathetic look that felt like a small lifeline. Still, the humiliation was overwhelming. I hated that my baby's cries were being treated as a public nuisance, something to be criticized instead of understood. The woman, meanwhile, seemed energized by the attention. She continued muttering about irresponsible parents and people who think rules don't apply to them. Each comment chipped away at my patience. I wasn't just defending a seat anymore. I was defending my right to exist in that space as a parent. My hands trembled as I soothed my baby, and inside, a resolve began to form. I had stayed quiet long enough. This situation had gone far beyond discomfort. It had become a test of dignity, and I wasn't going to let her strip that away from me. Something in me finally shifted. I realized that staying silent wasn't keeping the peace, it was allowing her to control the situation. Taking a slow breath, I leaned slightly toward the flight attendant and spoke quietly. careful to keep my voice steady despite how hard my heart was pounding. I asked if she could please double-check my booking details. Not because I doubted them, but because I wanted everything to be clear and official. I didn't look at the woman when I spoke. I didn't need to. I could feel her watching, waiting for some sign of weakness. The flight attendant nodded politely and asked for my boarding pass. As she scanned it, her expression changed in a way that was subtle but unmistakable. Her posture straightened, and the professional smile on her face became warmer, more assured. She glanced back at her screen, then at me, and gave a small, reassuring nod. That single gesture told me everything I needed to know. Whatever she had just seen confirmed that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. She turned toward the woman who had been causing the scene, and her tone shifted from gentle to firm. It wasn't rude or aggressive, just authoritative, the kind of voice that doesn't invite argument. She explained that the Bassinet seat was not only pre-assigned but secured under my frequent flyer status. I was a platinum member, which meant certain accommodations were guaranteed and could not be overridden by another passenger's preference. There would be no seat change, no discussion, no exceptions. For the first time since this began, the woman was silent. Her confident posture collapsed into something smaller, more defensive. She opened her mouth as if to argue, then seemed to realize there was nothing left to say. The authority she had tried to wield evaporated in an instant. Around us, the cabin seemed to breathe again. The tension eased, replaced by a quiet awareness that the situation had reached its end. The flight attendant then turned back to me, her voice softening once more. She apologized for the disturbance and assured me that my comfort and my baby's safety were a priority. She asked if there was anything else I needed: water, blankets, extra assistance. That kindness, after everything that had just happened, nearly brought me to tears. It felt like validation, like someone finally saying, "You were not wrong for being here." The woman was instructed to return to her seat. As she walked away, her face was flushed, her movements stiff. She avoided looking at anyone, especially me. A few passengers watched her go with expressions that ranged from disbelief to quiet satisfaction. Someone nearby murmured, "Good," under their breaths, and I felt a strange mix of relief and empowerment settle over me. I looked down at my baby, now calm again, and gently rested my hand on the edge of the bassinet. In that moment, I realized this wasn't about status or labels. It was about standing up when it mattered. She had assumed I'd fold under pressure, that I'd be too tired or too intimidated to speak. Instead, she learned a lesson she clearly wasn't expecting. Entitlement doesn't win when rules, respect, and calm confidence are on your side. The rest of the flight unfolded in a way that felt almost surreal after everything that had just happened. The woman who had caused the scene remained in her seat, silent and rigid, avoiding eye contact with everyone around her. The energy she brought into the cabin, sharp, tense, demanding, was completely gone. In its place was an awkward quiet, the kind that follows when someone realizes they've misjudged a situation and lost publicly. I didn't feel triumphant so much as relieved. The storm had passed, and my baby was finally resting peacefully. The flight attendants checked on us often after that. One brought a warm blanket for my baby. Another offered to hold my drink while I adjusted the bassinet. Each small gesture felt like a reminder that kindness still exists. Even after an ugly moment, I could tell they were making a point not just to care for us, but to reinforce that what happened earlier wasn't acceptable. Their professionalism and empathy transformed the rest of the flight into something calm, even comforting. At one point, I noticed a woman across the aisle smile at me and whisper, "You handled that really well." A man behind me gave a quiet nod of approval. These brief, silent acknowledgments meant more than any apology ever could. They made me feel seen, not as a problem or an inconvenience, but as a parent doing their best in a challenging situation. It reminded me that while one person can create a scene, many others are watching, learning, and silently choosing sides. As the plane cruised at altitude, I had time to reflect on what had happened. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. If that woman had simply asked politely, or shown even a hint of empathy, the entire situation could have been different. Instead, She assumed dominance would get her what she wanted. She treated rules as optional and other people's needs as negotiable. In the end, those assumptions worked against her. When we landed, the difference in how we exited the plane was striking. I was assisted with my baby, given time and space, treated with patience. She rushed off quickly, head down, eager to disappear into the crowd. There was no confrontation, no final words exchanged. The lesson had already been delivered, quietly and completely. Walking through the terminal, I felt lighter than I had all day. Not because ID won, but because ID stood my ground without losing my composure. ID protected my child, upheld my dignity, and refused to be pushed aside by someone else's entitlement. That experience stayed with me long after the flight ended. It taught me something important. Karma doesn't always come with drama or shouting. Sometimes it arrives at 35,000 feet, dressed in airline policy and quiet authority. And sometimes, the most powerful response to entitlement is calm confidence, knowing your place, owning it, and letting the universe handle the rest. If you believe entitlement should always meet karma, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We share real-life stories where respect wins and Karens get shut down so you don't miss the next one.